So while I was at school, I decided to get a job at a small grocery store in my town. My manager was pretty flexible with my schedule, and I needed the cash for gas. I got trained by this guy who kind of gave me weird vibes, but I figured he was just super socially awkward. Eventually, I got pretty comfortable with him being around, and in fact would ask him for help with anything I didn't know because he knew everything there was to know about the job. A couple months after I started, my boss had called me into the office, and as soon as I got in, she was crying. Another store manager was there too, and he was also quiet and visibly shook up. They told me that the guy had turned himself into the police the night before for murder. There had been an infamous murder in the town over 4 years ago, where a woman had been stabbed while jogging in a trail at around 7 p.m. that night. It was a cold case, and pretty much everyone had moved on from it. Apparently this guy had done it and kept it a secret for 4 years, but the guilt finally got to be too much. The worst part is that no one would have guessed it either. He was always nice and very helpful with everyone. The customers were so upset by it for months. The week before he turned in, he bought me a cherry wine soda because I never had one and I had to try it. It took me a really long time to be able to wrap my head around this. It's truly scary that you never really know who you're around or what they're capable of. Please be careful out there. You just never know. In July of 2017, 4 teenagers went missing in New Hope, Pennsylvania. I worked the overnight shift in the area, and from around 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. we get all types of different people. Normal obnoxious drunks, cops, and the occasional construction worker/gardener in there for their morning coffee. So when yet another customer came in covered in dirt, I figured he was just a hard-working man in a blue-collar job. He had been in before, so we made small talk, and he went on his way. That was Friday. I didn't see him on Saturday, but then Sunday he was in again. He got food and a drink, and after the normal, "Hi, how are you?" he went on his way again. Monday comes around, and I'm working like normal, when a few cops come in for coffee, and you can tell something's wrong. "We got a lead on one of those missing teens," they said solemnly. "We're searching a farm down the road." All of our hearts began to sink. It had been days since they were missing, so we were slowly losing hope, but this confirmed our worst suspicions. The cops were out there all night long, stopping in occasionally to update us, whether or not they were actually supposed to. They brought in dogs, and they eventually found them, 12 feet down and covered in concrete. It was bad. At the actual scene, they could only identify 2 of the teens based on their clothing, but there were enough bones to imply that all 4 were down there. Everyone was devastated. Then the cops asked for our security tapes. Why? We asked, confused. It was then that they revealed that the killer, a guy named Cosmo DiNardo, had in fact been in our store Friday night and again on Sunday. His cousin actually helped him kill, but he wasn't in the store. Well, the man covered in dirt was the murderer. I was totally floored, and when I left for work, I looked up a picture of the man that they arrested. It was him. He was covered in dirt because he had just buried the bodies. I couldn't believe it. I had made small talk with him, and I even wished him a good day. I've struggled with mental issues for most of my life, and I've ended up in mental hospitals because of it a couple of times now. While there, I made a couple of good friends, and we would all tell each other stories and random things about us. One of my friends had briefly been in jail with Cosmo DiNardo. Apparently, even though he seemed completely normal when I met him, he's completely lost his mind, lashing out and talking to himself. The whole shtick. I just really can't believe this happened. Disclaimer: I am no longer active on OkCupid. On to the story. This was in 2015. I wasn't really actively looking, but I would pop on to OkCupid every few weeks to see if anything interesting was ever in my inbox. Being female, I had a very active inbox. I noticed an email from an interesting, fairly local guy. The email was alright, asking about polyamory, which I don't mind talking about if the person asking is sincerely interested and respectful. We got to chatting. I had zero/romantic sexual interest, but I thought this could be a cool friendship. After a few months of chatting, he found me on the Book of Faces. He asked me if it was okay to send a friend request, and I agreed. We'd been chatting and getting along really well, and he seemed like a nice person. A little weird, but that's okay, because I'm a little bit weird myself. No big deal. We continued to chat here and there for about 2 years. Send birthday greetings, just the casual friendship. He has asked me several times to meet up and hang out. I've considered it, but at the time, I was running my own business and working upwards of 70 hours a week, plus maintaining my own home, raising my younger child, and trying to balance 2 partners and an extremely needy, demanding workaholic client who had no boundaries. So the meetup never occurred, but we kept in touch online. So late last year, there was a news story that broke out about a man and his girlfriend raping and murdering her young teenage daughter. I never connected the name until a friend contacted me and then said, "Oh, I see you're friends with so-and-so. Did you see the news?" The news stories all used his full legal name, not his nickname, which is why I never connected the two. It was him. My then online friend of about 2 years had beaten, raped, strangled, and then even dismembered his girlfriend's teen daughter with the girlfriend's help. He's made several statements since then stating that he's always had this rape/murder fantasy and that this child was very sexual and that it wasn't fun for him to murder her. Well, not as fun as he thought it would be. To this day, it still sends chills down my spine. I dodged a bullet. Big time. Be safe out there, everyone. You really never know who's on the other side of that keyboard or phone call. And dude, I really hope we never meet again. My girlfriend and I took some time out to do some backpacking and travel the world. We went to some incredible places and met some interesting people, but our most interesting story is probably this one. As I said, we went all over. However, we're both pretty good at reading people and staying out of trouble, so we never had any major incidents. We were on a fairly tight budget at this point in our journey, as we had recently been to Japan and wanted to chill for a bit before finding some work in Vietnam. We decided to volunteer on a Cambodian island. It's a bit of a luxury island full of resorts that we couldn't normally afford to stay at, so it seemed like a good gig for us at the time. I worked behind this bar at this resort, and my girlfriend worked at the restaurant. In return, we got to sleep in the dorm and got our own meals for free. The manager told me that since I was working behind the bar, and the Scottish and English guy who lived on the island would likely come and see me, and that his name was Dog. It didn't take very long for this to take place. A fairly old guy in his late 50s, early 60s came into the bar. He was quite tall and still powerfully built, and was accompanied by a massive Rottweiler, which he quickly told me was also called Dog. We had a bit of a laugh taking the piss out of each other. He was making fun of me being Scottish, and I was making fun of him for being named Dog, and just the typical English BS. I noticed that he was always wearing wife beaters which said Dog's Offshore Bar, and it had a picture of his dog on it, the Rottweiler. I got to know a bit more about Dog the man. He used to work in construction and offshore, as did I, so we had quite a bit to talk about, and heaps of opportunity to talk, as he usually arrived for his beer at around 7 a.m. It was obvious he was an alcoholic, but he never struck me as a bad person early on, just a sadly complicated one, like when you talk to someone who's homeless. Anyone who's never been to Vietnam/Thailand/Cambodia or any Southeast Asian country will understand how rare it is to see a dog that's not some kind of street mutt or a tiny pet. Dog's huge dog would stand out even in Europe, however. Even for a Rottweiler, this thing was huge. Massively muscular with a metal chain. I guess it was to give some semblance of control if it was to ever kick off. I really like dogs, so I was quite interested in what this huge dog was doing on the island, and I always made sure to have some water out for it. It was friendly enough, but never left his owner's side, and it seemed to be a working dog. In terms of its intensity, this thing was clearly a guard dog. As it turned out, the dog was actually a Finnish drug dealer's dog, and that dog had bought him. He told me that the dog had an attack command, and kept him primed by using it often on other island dogs. He told me that his dog had killed multiple dogs this way. I didn't believe this at first, but there was an island dog that the manager would often leave food out for this, and this dog would usually come near the bar usually when Dog's monster dog wasn't out about. But that night he must have been hungry enough to brave it, and Dog hissed the command, and the Rottweiler bound for the island dog, knocking over chairs and all sorts until he called it off. It was pretty scary. One night I was sat at the bar talking with Dog about this job that I would soon be taking on at a digital marketing company. I was in talks with the CEO at this company at the time. It was for a digital marketing job in which I would be working from home or coffee shops updating and improving websites. He said it sounded made up and that the company was likely some kind of con to get my bank details. I told him it was a real company and that I had Googled it. He was really drunk at this point, and the restaurant was now closed, so my girlfriend joined us and we were all having a beer at the bar. He told my girlfriend how I believed everything that I read online and how I shouldn't do that. He said that people publish all kinds of made-up crap on there, and I asked what he was referring to, and then he just said, "Never Google me." So I was like, how could I Google you? Your name is Dog. If I actually Googled you, I would just see a picture of a dog. But then I remembered those tops he wore, Dog's Offshore Bar, so I then told him, "I'm going to Google you," saying this while laughing. He was getting quite annoyed, but at this point, other than owning a weaponized canine, I thought he was pretty harmless. I was wrong. I began reading out loud the interesting things that I found out about this bar and some related stories. One of particular interest was about a conviction. The joking and laughing stopped, and I quickly stopped reading out loud. I looked quickly to my girlfriend and I could see the smile leave her face as she realized we were drinking with a killer. As it turns out, this guy had murdered his Thai wife and then been briefly imprisoned before paying bail, and then he fled the country before his trial. He had apparently stabbed her, and his alibi to the police was that he couldn't have killed her because he was on the beach at the time. He told us that he had been framed and that his wife's ex was in the police and that he had her killed before moving on. I was nodding along to everything he was saying and trying my best to show that I agreed with him, all the while making sure that the machete that I used to open up coconuts for cocktails was in easy reach should the beast be given any command words. He told us about how hard it was being one of the few white guys in a Thai prison, how he had to attack guards to get into solitary confinement and then they would beat him mercilessly. He told us that they used to leave shanks in his room and then put him in the yard with pedophiles for him to kill. He told us that he had killed before he went to prison and that he had killed while he was inside, but that he never once killed his wife. His wife was a Thai prostitute that he met while trafficking women from Thailand to Singapore on his boat. The same one that he used to flee Thailand after his arrest and set up his bar, Dog's Offshore Bar. With a tagline like "Dogs are welcome," his wife must have been kept on leashes or under control. We both acted like we believed him, and eventually he left. The whole night, however, I was waiting next to the door for him and his dog to come for us. I even propped a bin up against the door so anyone coming in would knock it over, so that we would maybe have a chance to react. I nearly attacked my friend when he came in. It was super messed up. We quickly decided to leave after this, and only saw Dog one more time after that. My girlfriend was opening a can of coconut milk for curry, and he came by and jokingly asked if she needed a knife, and he patted his back pocket. This guy is actually known as Mick the Palm or Mick the Dog if you want to Google this. If you happen to Google Dog's Offshore Bar, you'll see what I did. He was living on a tent on the island with his dog keeping watch while he slept. I'm not really sure if he's still there now, but Dog, let's never, ever meet again. I was in a city far from my town in the Netherlands to play a show with my band. At the end of the show, a guy came up to us to say that he liked our music. He asked if we wanted to join him to have more beers in a bar downtown. We gladly joined him and went on our way. We could tell by his accent that he wasn't from this part of the country, and we asked why he was living here. Apparently he stayed after he did some time in prison. We continued to ask about it, and he eventually told us that he committed a double murder, served a total of 15 years, and didn't have any regrets. So we don't talk about it anymore, got really drunk at the bar, and after closing, we went on our way. We were staying at the place of a girl that volunteers at the venue we played at. She apparently was also a friend of the guy. On the way back, we looked up the newspaper article concerning the double murder, and we found it right away. We ended up finding out that this guy killed his neighbors, a mother and a son. First he killed the woman, then had intercourse with her. After that, he knew that he had to wait for her son to come home, so while waiting in their home, he decided to play video games. When the son finally came home, he met his end as well. As you can imagine, we were very disturbed by this article, and felt really weird for going out with this sicko. The next morning, the girl who was friends with the killer asked if we had a good time yesterday with the guy. We said it was all fine, but that she really should have mentioned his past before waving at us the night before. So she then reacts as if she doesn't know anything of what we're talking about, thinking the guy is just joking with us, and we show her the article. She's still figuring this out and decides to call a friend from the venue who apparently actually knows him really well. Meanwhile, we're thinking that he actually just joked with us, and if so, he did very well imitating the killer from the article. After a while, she comes back from calling and then just says, apparently it's true. She looked devastated. I really feel bad for her because she considered him a friend. She actually told us that he was even the only one she trusted when they went to a festival with a group of about 20 people. I can't even imagine what their next meeting would be like. I really hope that I never meet this guy again, but if I do, I will definitely be nice and ask how he's doing. But I really hope that doesn't happen. So this process happened just a few months ago, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. So at the start of the year, we were introduced to all of our teachers, and all of them were pretty good teachers. That is, except Miss C. So we went through classes, and each one we go to, they have those cheesy beginning of the year introductions. It was quickly clear that her class wouldn't be a normal health class, as evidenced by the fact that during her introduction, she went off about how terrible her divorced husband was. So classes started picking up, and her insecurities somehow kept making it into the lectures. One day a few weeks into school, she just stopped showing up to class. You know, her job, and she did this pretty consistently. Now at this point, everyone was cutting her some slack because she was a single mom, but it just got worse. We would have to do whole units from a workbook with improvised substitutes. This culminated when Miss C missed 2 weeks of school for no apparent reason. Most of the class could totally see her mental deterioration. Me and some friends in class started noticing some form of distress from Miss C more, and more stuff about her personal life would leak into lectures that she was there. Suddenly it came to a head. She suddenly became distant and developed a tough shell around her. Miss C actually started coming to class consistently too. She started bringing her kids to class. I have a hunch that she started doing this to help justify her inactions to her employers. One day she sort of just broke down in class about her horrible husband not taking equal responsibility for their kids. It was a really bad joke at this point at just how long Miss C would actually last before being fired. Unluckily for us, it was way too long. We just sort of endured lectures from this mentally unstable woman. Mind you, she was doing a fine job at suppressing traits associated with that around other school employees. One day we come and she wasn't in class, breaking her streak of actually coming. We finally got our answer of how long she would last. A counselor walked into the room and everyone knew what was up. She was gone. So you want to know what went down exactly? She walked into her ex-husband's house on the Sunday before that class period. Her excuse to her ex was to deliver cold medication to her kids. After threatening to call the cops after her home invasion, she locked herself in the bathroom. She called the cops and unlocked the door to the bathroom. She then walked over to her coat, pulled out a gun, and opened fire on her ex's girlfriend, killing her instantly. Miss C was then pinned down until the cops showed up. That wasn't her first offense either. It was suspiciously close to the time when she hardly showed up to her job. She actually had several assault charges against her that she somehow managed to keep secret to her job as a teacher. Weirdly enough, students who didn't have her as a teacher didn't take her very seriously. It took less than 30 minutes after that info was made public to the students in general for them to make a meme page about the entire incident. It's weird how that worked, but it got taken down. Anyway, mentally unstable teacher who committed aggravated murder and let your insecurities leak into your teaching, please stay away from me. This is one of those close call stories. I had been around 9 to 10 years old when this happened. In October of 2006, a mother of 2 kids that I went to school with had went missing on one of the bike paths that ran through our town. Initially, the police had suspected that it was her husband, but they ended up finding her body a few yards off the bike path, and everything was consistent with 3 murders that occurred in the 90s on a bike path in a town about 15 minutes away from mine. They had arrested a man for those murders without conclusive evidence. Anyways, my story happened about 3 weeks before this woman went missing. My dad and I were walking on the same bike path that goes through my town behind our high school, and it was only 5 minutes from my old house. We always came walking up here with our old golden retriever named Aspen. Off of this bike path was a hill, and sometimes we would go down it and walk along the woods towards a meadow. My dad decided that he was going to take my dog down it so that she could run down it a few times and it would give her some cardio. Anyways, my dad went down the hill and for whatever reason, I decided to stay up. I'm just standing there for a few minutes, just looking around, when a man with a German Shepherd walks up to me. He starts asking me how I'm doing and if this is my favorite bike path. I answer him and I was a bit hesitant because I had always been taught stranger danger, but I didn't want to be rude to him. While he's talking, 2 women walk beside us, and he asked me if they're my parents. I then say no, and he asked if I would walk with him and his dog for a bit, because he really liked talking to me. I started getting really nervous, and I said no, but he kept insisting that I come with him. Finally, my 10-year-old head was like, this is enough, and I began screaming bloody murder for my dad, and he runs up with our dog while this guy gives my dad a really quick look as he's getting to the top of the hill and starts running away with his dog. I'm crying hysterically while my dad is calming me down and calling 911. One cop who was on duty near our location came to us and he had a few guys on the lookout for this guy. My best description for them other than the dog was that he was a bit taller with a beard and darker features. Well, they never found the guy. Fast forward a few weeks. This woman goes missing. They end up finding her and get a bunch of DNA evidence. They find this guy that lives a few towns away, matches his DNA with the murders from the 90s. It's the same guy. He killed this woman and those other women as well. He lived an average life with wife and kids. No one ever suspected him of doing it. The guy that they had arrested in the 90s was released and given tons of compensation. When they released the guy's face on the TV, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was none other than the creep who tried to take me with him on the bike path. It made both my dad and I sick when we saw his picture, and to this day, we sometimes still talk about it. I really dodged a bullet. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Steph L, Tammy S, Terry H, 2Eki for you, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people, and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you, everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always